Morning, everyone, and welcome to the scoreboard. That wasn't what we expected. I'm trying to work out now whether Mitchell Starc and KL Rahul are the greatest batters in world cricket, and that's what we saw today. Because yesterday I was told that the batters weren't very good. So by batting well today, that must mean that KL Rahul and Mitchell Starc are absolutely great. And they must be the two players with the best defensive techniques, which I was also told there's no defensive techniques yesterday. Though it seems like run scoring was really slow yesterday and it was really slow today. But that's a different argument, I suppose. But yeah, KL Rahul is an absolute great of batting. That's what we learned from today. In fact, what we really learned from today is that it is possible within the space of a few hours for a pitch to completely change overnight from one of the greenest wickets we've seen to one of the flattest wickets we have seen. And it was quite noticeable pretty much from the time Mitchell Starc started to get himself set, just how good a batting pitch this was. Then we had to watch Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood not score runs for an awfully long time. I'm not sure I've ever seen a situation where two players looked so set and needed to score runs and just decided that this is not what they were going to do in this particular game. These guys went absolutely, did everything in their possibility not to score any runs. And so for about an hour, the match situation really didn't change. It's just that the Indians had to sit out there and wait for their chance to bat. And then when they got a chance to bat, was it the pitch that had flattened, or was it the fact that Australia was playing against the old ball? Well, it turns out it wasn't the pitch. Sorry, it wasn't the ball, it was the pitch. And that was the thing that changed absolutely everything. And Jaiswal and Rahul batted very well in slightly more favourable conditions. And Australia, a bit like they did when they batted, just waited and waited. They talked about patience. They were incredibly patient. Travis Head said that he thought they were okay in the middle session. They kept waiting and they kept waiting. By the end of the day, what did we have? We had Marnus Labuschagne bowling 2 spells of bounces. I think that tells you something about Australian cricket right at the moment and how they're going in this game. One spell of Marnus Labuschagne bounces, fool me once, bounce me twice, and you're in all sorts of trouble. But I think the best story from today has to be Alex Carey, who went out there thinking, well, we can put a bit of a dent in India's lead and maybe even sneak one ourselves. And instead, he got a Jasprit Bumrah ball that seemed to wave viciously, and he edged that through. He then spent the rest of the day watching cricket with only 2 more wickets happening. That is not a good day if you are Alex Carey.
NVPlay helped me make this content. For detailed performance breakdowns of your game using technology and data, contact them today.
Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harshit and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a 6 from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend.
All right, let's get cracking with the scoreboard. So same as always, we'll do a little bit of analysis on here, and then we'll pop over into the comments. So if you've got a super chat, we'll definitely get to that, but we'll see if there's anything else that tickles me or Varun's fancies, our collective fancies, our individual fancies, all the different kinds of fancies. But also, just a shout out also to Hit Wicket. Huge thanks to them and all the support. If you want to support this channel and you can't afford a super chat or, to be a Patreon subscriber and all that sort of thing, downloading Hit Wicket is a huge help for us. So anyone who can do that, thank you very much. But let us get on with the show. I love this graphic so much. I just love how much the pitch has changed in color from the 2 days. And this happens sometimes. It certainly happens in places like Perth, which are just too hot for, humanity, really, if we're being honest. And it can completely dry out. But nothing sort of encapsulates the fact that we're playing on 2 different pitches better than the actual colors of the surfaces there. But we do have some graphics as well. I don't want to pretend that we're just doing that. So I wanted to show something very specific about this, which is Mitchell Starc's control percentage. So he was only out of control for 20% of the time. And remember, he was batting with the tail and swinging, quite lustily at a couple of shots, although not that lustily. But occasionally he was trying to hit out and everything else. And you can just see how in control he was in that innings compared to, say, Marnus Labuschagne. So it did show you, even within this, that the pitch had started to settle down. Hazlewood, probably, I was thinking, watching it, that Starc maybe made a mistake in not letting Hazlewood face a few extra balls so they could have got extra runs. You look at this and maybe Starc was on something. But we could show you all sorts of metrics about that, the pitch and everything else. But this is hilarious, this one. If someone on the main channel yesterday left a comment saying, oh, Jared, that you can't look at the Perth first day stats because generally Australia bat first and they make a lot of runs. And yesterday India batted first. And I was like, but Australia did bat yesterday and they still failed. So I think it tells you that the wicket was different. Generally, you average about 64 on day one at Perth, and on day two, you average about 38. Yesterday, the average was 12.76, and today, the average was 69.33. I've looked at the control percentage of this, and I think there's an element of maybe the wicket slowing down a little bit as well, because the seam movement and the control percentage doesn't necessarily tell you that this should be the case. I think Varun said that there was a lot of inside edges today. So maybe, where there are inside edges today onto the pad or dribbling out on the leg side, yesterday there are outside edges that went into the cordon. Perhaps it's as simple as that. But it does show you how much different. I mean, really, it's two different test matches that we have seen so far. And the fact that it started with the Australian tail, you can't even just say that like India were on top. It literally is a completely different surface. But just want to show you how much it has been seaming. So neither side, sorry, this is India, isn't it? So this is India's innings from yesterday to today. You can see here that Siraj swung a couple of balls and Bumrah had a little bit of swing. But realistically, there isn't a lot of swing, and neither side, outside of perhaps Mitch Starc, has really tried to get swing. But look at the amount of balls that have seamed a lot. Like you've got some balls here that have seamed 2 degrees over here, quite a few more than 1 degree, and a lot between half a degree and 1. And then the same on this side. That's a lot of seam movement in both directions. And you can see that specifically it did start to slow down a little bit towards the end of India's innings. But this is really what I wanted to show you. This is sort of at the average of seam movement around the world. So a friend of mine sent me this a while back, and you could see here that when the ball starts seaming basically more than about 0.6 degrees in either direction, the averages drop a lot. So when it's going away from the right-handers, you've got here, when it's more than 6 degrees of seam movement, the average drops to, just about 23, 24. The further it gets, the worse it is, until a point where you actually get a little kick back up on the other sides. And that's because at this point, you start to play and miss, I suppose. No, I don't even know. But either way, the magic amount is around 1 degree. So yesterday, we saw seam movement around this portion for a good period of the day. That is why the averages were so low. And you can see it's the same on both sides over here. This is fairly uniform, and we could see this, whether it be modern cricket or over the last couple of years. So modern batters, whether it be of recent times or even ye olde times, when the ball is coming on straight, they have no issues. When it starts to seam violently, whether it's into them or away from them, that is where the problems happen. So today we didn't see that same amount of seam movement, and we could see just here, the first inning specifically was absolutely brutal. So it starts off very similar with the brand new ball, but from the 10 over to 20 over mark, look how much seam India had to put up with at that point. And remember, this can have a lot to do with the kind of bowlers you have. Like Josh Hazlewood is going to get more seam than, say, Mohammad Siraj is normally, just because he's going to get more out of a surface like that. But then you could see for the rest of the time, and it was actually quite similar. So both teams just had to deal with a lot of seam all the way through. Interestingly enough, that it was still seaming towards the end of Australia's innings there, a fair amount. So this is now the third innings. the third inning starts off a lot. It dips, and then straight away we see that there is not a lot of seam there. That we are now talking about a situation. It is a very vastly different pitch. So some of this, the median seam is less than half. So that's 0.86 degrees seam between overs 20 and 30. And this is 0.4. That's a huge difference. A massive difference. And I just want to show one thing here. See, in the second innings when India were bowling and it stopped seaming for a little while, I'm not sure what the reason was for that. Maybe they were trying to swing it in that period or whatever. But remember, by that stage, Boomer had already done quite a bit of damage. And so Australia were reeling a little bit. But for the most of the important parts of this innings, it's been quite similar. And then we come to the third innings, and it just, after that 20 over mark specifically, there's no swing. But even this, you're talking about 0.5 degrees and 0.5 degrees. And just to go back here, when you're looking at 0.5s, you're looking in this period, right? So it can go either way, right? I wouldn't say it's favorable towards batting, but there's a big difference. Whereas once you get to what's this one? This one's 0.9, and these ones are 0.8. And then if you go back here, so 0.9, 0.9, 0.8, 0.8, these sorts of areas. That's the difference between today and yesterday. And it's not that suddenly Mitchell Starc, KL Rahul, and Jaiswal are the best batters in the world, although Jaiswal probably has a fairer claim than the other two on that. It just tells you how much things have changed. It's always worth, doing that. We can't always get that kind of information. Sometimes we can, and we're lucky, or we stumble across it. But in this particular case, it really shows. Here's Jaiswal. I love the way he batted today. He was in control of his game. He looked a lot more technically sound. He didn't have that big front foot in the air. He wasn't chasing the ball. He was allowing Australia to bowl to him. I don't know if it was just a conversation that, a coach or another player had with him, but it felt like he just said to himself, okay, I'm just going to wait for the ball to be in my right area. So that Mitchell Starc shot where he picks him up and hits him over backward point for 6, or the Pat Cummins one where it was short and he flicks it over slips. Those are balls that were poorly executed. And Australia didn't actually bowl terribly today. Those were balls where the field wasn't set for them and he could attack. The vast majority of the time, he didn't do that at all. And so what we have at the moment is his slowest score over a strike rate of 50. So we could see here, slowest score of over 50 runs is what I meant to say, not over a strike rate of 50. So we could see here that there was an innings in Chennai that was pretty slow. He's got another ranchy one up here. We do have the 100 he made in the West Indies. So that was slower. I just realized this now. That was a little bit slower. So it's not the only time he's ever shown us this. Obviously, when he's batted in India and made the really big scores, he's gone on a lot quicker. And we've got a lot of quicker scores here. Pretty much everything from Ranchi up is either a healthy strike rate to a ridiculous strike rate up here. That's the vast majority of his scores. And then we've got this one, and this one are the only ones where he's shown that. But that's awesome, because having this in your bag and having this and this in your bag shows the flexibility of him. The other thing was him outside off stump. I wondered if he was leaving the ball more, and so therefore Australia weren't putting him under the sort of normal pressure. And so I looked up the leaving stats, and you can see here, usually he leaves around 28% of deliveries from test match bowlers. And today it was at 21%. So I think it's more to do with the fact he just felt a little bit more comfortable outside off stump. And he wasn't trying to attack balls to take pressure off himself. So if you look in the first innings, he's under pressure. The ball's moving around a little bit. He gets that loose ball. He tries to force it away, to put pressure back on the bowler at that point. And instead, he doesn't have the ability to do that. And he ends up nicking the ball to gully and is dismissed. In this innings, he didn't have to force anything. The ball wasn't doing a lot, so he just had to make sure it hit the middle of the bat as much as possible, and then very occasionally he would go. And so he was actually hitting more balls. It's just that a lot of those leaves were strong defensive shots with his toes on the ground, eyes right on top of the ball, and everything else. Really good innings there. This is KL Rahul's innings outside of India. It's a fascinating record, this. KL Rahul's stats, every time you delve into them are so incredible. I mean, look at the amount of overseas hundreds and big scores he had to begin his career. And then look at this. And he's had 2 periods of basically, not being able to string together any kinds of scores over decently long times. Even this period, there's no 50s in here either. But what KL Rahul has managed to do quite consistently is make hundreds overseas. So he doesn't have a good average overseas because of all of this and bits of this, right? But so he essentially makes 100. Occasionally, we've got a couple of these high 50s as well. Or it's a string of failures. It's a remarkable record because we're going to look back on this and he's always going to be remembered for his average. And I think someone asked me a question on Wagon Wheel the other day about how we look at players who are that sort of backup batter, because they have to play in whatever position is available to them. They're in and out the side. He's an opening batter, then he's a top order batter, then he's a middle order batter. He's told he's going to be a middle order batter. Now he's opening again. All this sort of stuff that keeps happening to him. And we can see the ceiling of him, but we can also see the floor. So is KL Rahul a player with a high ceiling, low floor? We don't see that in limited overs cricket. So is he a different player between those two? I find him endlessly fascinating. There's a few videos we've done on him, but well done to him. There was enough seam movement early on. I thought once they got past Hazelwood, I think Hazelwood comes off in a 10th over. I thought at that stage, India, I can tell you this. I put a big bet on India at that stage because I thought that was the key danger. And my big worry was Australia was going to come back and bowl 3 or 4 overs of bounces and that Jaiswal and KL Rahul wouldn't be able to do that. But the hearts of KL Rahul available in 2030. I like that. But I never really got to that level. They never really got to that level. And I wonder if they are just really scared of the 5-test series. They obviously don't want Mitch Marsh to do it. Not that he's that kind of bowler. But it was really noticeable that they never went for that. Because there was one bouncer they bowled to KL Rahul early on. And he played a really awful hook shot. I think it went through to the wicketkeeper. And I just thought, okay, just give him that for 12 balls. Let's test his patience. And they never went with it. I think part of the reason was because they were batting so slow, Australia thought eventually they would nip one out, probably get someone else out, open it up, and then get back into the game. But they weren't very proactive. But to be fair to KL Rahul and Jaiswal, they completely took the steam out of the contest. There's still a chance that if this wicket is as good as it is and the cracks don't open up, Australia might be able to chase a decent total and everything else. But India massively ahead, and he has to get the credit. Oh, and the last thing I will say about KL Rahul is no Indian fan who's been slagging him off deserves him to be successful today. It's so funny that it is him of all people. He's probably looked the best of any batter in this test. I suppose it's hard to say because we've seen it, but I thought he looked really good in the first innings as well. He's looked really organised, and I like the way he's been leaving the ball and getting his bat behind his pad. It's very hard to leave the ball in modern cricket because it's not like the old days when you could see the ball swinging away or you could see the ball back of a length, so you knew it was going to go well over the stumps or you knew it was going to be shaping away. These days, so many balls are angling back in. Bowlers are coming wider on the crease. They're bowling fuller. They're keeping the stumps in play. The wobble ball is a little bit more unpredictable. All these things. I really was impressed by the way he played. And I'm sure now that finally all the Indian fans will come to him as one. Can't wait to see the comments on that one. This was another thing. We did the Morning Glory show. So if you haven't seen our Morning Glory show, we've only done the one so far. We might keep it up all the way through this series. But at lunch, I came on. Wasn't the most exciting lunch break after just watching Australia's tail enders block for 2 hours. But it was a really good show, and we take questions from the audience. We had a few super chats, but a lot of just normal comments came through as well. And I tried to answer as many as I could. Some really interesting comments. But one of them was about India struggling with the tail. And I really thought to myself, I get asked this a lot, but I can't remember the last time I looked it up. Like, is India a bad team with the tail? So the first thing I actually looked up was just batting. So you can see here that the last 3 wickets for Australia have done very well. There was, we saw the Hazelwood, Cameron Green partnership in New Zealand. So we've seen a few occasions where Australia have managed to just score a lot of runs batting with the tail. So no one's particularly surprised, I don't think, by the fact Australia's number 1. Sri Lanka's done very well. with their tail end batting as well. And remember, top order players can make runs in this. I'm looking at the average for the last 3 wickets. But you can see that India's done quite well. So what about with the ball? Is that where India struggled? No, India's actually been the best team at bowling to the tail and finishing off an innings. And it's really interesting now that the Indian fans don't see things like this anymore. They are so used to their team being so dominant and being so successful that they are finding issues where there are no issues. Now, I didn't know India would have the best record against the tail in the last 3 years. But I thought they'd be pretty high, which is why I looked this up. And you can see here that Australia's, a little bit back. South Africa, a bowling team. You usually expect bowling teams, especially with them, a strike bowling team, to do very well. Ireland hasn't played a lot of test matches, but they've had some success. But, India's still quite comfortably, the best team when bowling to the tail. And so this is it as a differential, essentially. So you can see that Australia has been the best team when it comes to batting with the tail and bowling out the opposition's tail. And India's like a hair's breadth behind them overall. So India's tail has been doing and better than most people give them credit for when they're batting, and their bowlers have done really well against the tail and not getting the credit that they should deserve there. And you can see just the vast majority of the rest of the teams are around neutral, and then we have a few real strugglers. So Bangladesh is a really good example of a team that has struggled. They don't bowl out the tail pretty well, and their tail is not making a lot of runs. Like that's a team that has some issues there, and how you overcome all that, it's very hard. But anyway, just thought we'd bring that up because it's a question that people have been asking. Now you can tell everyone, no, India doesn't struggle with the tail. Let's get to, I found this very interesting. So unfortunately, very disappointed with this. But at one stage today, this was the slowest test match in Australia for the last 20 years. And Jaiswal and KL had to score a little bit quicker. I thought they would. And so I was actually a little bit surprised it took them as long as it did. But I thought they would eventually kick on and score a little bit quicker. But when I looked it up, I was shocked that it was the slowest in the last 20 years. I wasn't shocked because that's why I looked it up. But even then, I was surprised it was the absolute slowest. So it is currently the 4th slowest test match. And it got down to about 2.54, I think, at its lowest. It just tells you that even on a good batting wicket, we didn't see, it's still not particularly easy to score runs quickly. So I almost feel that this is a wicket at the moment that we only saw 3 wickets fall today. But within those 3 wickets, we didn't see anyone score particularly comfortably. So it's probably a wicket, and I'm basing it completely on today, that is hard to be dismissed on rather than a wicket that is easy to score on. And the fact that, once KL Rahul, and there was that little period where they scored, was it 22 runs or 28 runs in 4 overs, which was Mitch Marsh, Pat Cummins when he bowled a short one, and I think there was a boundary off Stark as well. That little period was probably the only flurry sort of early in the day until the ball really did get soft later on. So I think this is the 113th test match in Australia in the last 20 years. I think that's right, because I was the one looking at these stats earlier. And so to be the 4th slowest of that, and it's, there aren't, I don't think there's any test matches over 4.2 or 4.3 in Australia. There might be an Australian West Indies one. Anyway, it's slow. Something else that Kerry O'Keefe mentioned on the Fox commentary today was how good Cummins has been in the 3rd innings. And we can see here that it's his best innings where he averages 18. He's really good. He's much better in the final 2 innings. And the reason for that is because he is so deadly accurate and can hit the stumps so often. And so when there's a little bit of variable bounce or anything, he usually can outweight batters. And once a couple of balls keep low, he just completely takes over. What's interesting here, maybe more so, is Hazlewood, who's kind of all over the shop in where he takes wickets. And you can see here that Mitchell Starc is a little bit the same, although in a slightly different pattern. But the majority of their wickets in the 3rd innings have come from Cummins and Hazlewood. Cummins just hasn't looked particularly good in this test match so far. He's looked a little bit rusty. There's a couple of times when I thought he's given width in a way that he doesn't usually, maybe more towards the left-hander than the right-hander. but he's overpitched at times. He just hasn't looked like the Cummins that we normally see. And he really struggled to get any sideways movement at all. And I know he doesn't get the same amount of sideways movement than Hazelwood does, but he usually gets some. So quite interesting there that we haven't seen much from Cummins there. And yeah, I thought that one was worth looking at. It's always fun looking at Lions' trajectory as well. It's always struggled in the fourth innings. But if you compare Lyon to other spinners, he's brilliant in the first innings and then slows down a little bit. Harshit Rana is someone that I really want to talk about. So these were the economies over the first two innings of the test match. So here's the sole spinner to bowl, right? And when I just said that Cummins has struggled going at 4 runs and over in the first innings, Harshit Rana, his economy looks worse because he went at over 3 runs and over, and Bumrah and Siraj went at no runs per over. Really good signs this from Siraj, by the way. This is the kind of bowling that we want from Siraj when he's not bowling at his best and he's not going for runs. He needs to find that Stuart Broad zone more and more. But I want to talk about Rana here because I think he's going to get some flack. And in fact, we got comments about it yesterday. Oh, how is India going to beat Australia if Rana's going to go for runs and everything else? Well, it's fine if he goes for less runs and over than Cummins. But Rana is more of an old-fashioned strike bowler, and that there's not an issue with that. But you have to know what you're getting. And by that, I mean, he goes at over 3 runs and over. But this is the control percentages, the false shot percentages, sorry, I should say. You've got here, the Bumrah had 33% of his balls had a false shot, which is ridiculous. He's a ridiculous human being. But you can see that Rana isn't far away. So yes, he's going to go for more runs, but he's also going to get more mistakes off his bowling. And so as long as, I'm not saying he's always going to keep a false shot percentage of 32%, but as long as he continues to create mistakes, you can allow the odd day where he goes for more runs. The issue is when he becomes a bit of a throwdown bowler, which will happen occasionally on bad days, but he has to make that a rare day and not a consistent thing. And when he becomes a bit of a throwdown bowler, at that stage, if he's not creating any sort of pressure on the outside edge or the inside edge of the stumps or whatever it may be, that's when he could be an issue. But it doesn't matter if he's got an economy that's higher than the other bowlers if he also has so many false shots coming off his bowling. Right? That's what you want from a strike bowler. That is your WACA Yunus or your Kagisa Rabada or those sort of famous strike bowlers. That's what they end up with. I'm not saying that Harshit Rana is going to get to that level or anything else. Also, really like the banter between Harshit Rana and Mitch Starc today. I love that because players are teammates now, they can have those sorts of conversations with each other in a way that wouldn't have happened as much in the old days unless you were lucky enough to be at a county together. All right, let's take a break. That's the end of the scoreboard. If you want to leave a comment or a super chat or any of those sorts of things, please do. But we're going to have a quick break here on the scoreboard, and we'll be back again very shortly for more of this kind of action.
If you are following my work, we know that you are a true cricket sadist and you need your hit every day. And sometimes, sadly, there is actually no cricket to watch. So how about if someone made a very fun game that you could use for the moments when there is no on-field action? Welcome to Hit Wicket, a strategic game of cricket which isn't about slamming your finger on the screen very fast. You work out what works best based on how cricket actually works. Dot balls lead to wickets, 1s and 2s to 4s and 6s. So there is no way you can bowl a great Yorker every ball or smash 3 6s at the beginning of your innings. This is proper cricket, yet it still has some gaming powers in there as well. Hit Wicket is about playing, but also building and managing your team. You are the batter, bowler, owner, coach, and captain. It's your dream. No ads, just cricket. So download Hit Wicket today, because this is a cricket game made for you and supported by major cricket nerds.
If you have a passion for sports and aspire to work in the industry, I invite you to explore my course, Fans with Laptops. This program is designed to equip you with the knowledge and skills necessary to excel in sports journalism. Fans with Laptops is a test match course tailored to the digestible T20 world. Embrace your nerdish obsession for sports and unlock your potential by enrolling in Fans with Laptops. Helps if I get rid of that. Let's go through some of the chats. Vikrant says, how often do we see a part-timer bowl 130 plus? Did it ever happen before? Oh yeah, it's definitely happened before. People have fast arm actions. Well, MS Dhoni, Matthew Wade, I would have thought would have been 2 of them. Greg Blewett would have got up to about 130 way back when. The difference is whether you could do it consistently, right? And keep it on the right spot and, bowl well. There are plenty of batters when you see them in the nets get the ball through, but quite often you watch them and they'll bowl like a half volley outside off stump and a short one down the leg side and everything else. So we have seen that before. I think what's more interesting about Marnus is that he was a leg spinner before and he's changing towards that. That's very common, by the way. So many young batters come through and bowl wrist spin, and then they stop bowling it at a certain age. Atherton, Hussein, Steve Smith, David Warner. Someone else I was thinking about the other day as well. Chandrapal? I think Chandrapal was another one, wasn't he? So we have seen that before. But yeah, it's not that uncommon for a batter to be able to bowl at a decentish speed. Usually it's about the control and everything else. It's a bit like you could get a lot, like if you watch professional tennis, there's a lot of players who serve at a slower speed. If you just get them into a machine where you can see how fast they can serve, they might not be that far off some of the guys at the top end, right? But they might not be tall enough to be able to replicate it and get it in correctly. Or they might not have a good enough service action to be able to do that or whatever it may be. But it doesn't mean that the guys who serve slower can't actually do that. Genius says, this opening stand for India felt like a point to prove for both batters. Excuse me. For Jaiswal, it was to show he's batting it overseas, and it's obvious with KL. It's just batting, isn't it? I think we read that kind of narrative into them. I think there's an element with KL Rahul where we know he's playing for his career almost in every innings. Although he's not, is he? Because India don't drop him all that much because they know the value of him, which we saw again today. But I think there's an element of him sort of playing a little bit more for that. Whereas I think with Jaiswal, he needs to overcome that off-stump issue. I thought he did that brilliantly today. Whether he can do that consistently is going to be the difference between him being a very good test batter and a out-and-out great, and he should be on the path to greatness, but he definitely has an issue when the ball is outside off stump. I could have done that graph today, actually, but I might leave it. If he makes a big 100 here, it's a really interesting one, actually. So we might do a feature on him tomorrow if he goes on and really makes a big score. But yeah, no, I just think it was more to do with the fact that Jaiswal tightened up his technique a little bit. KL batted quite well in the first innings, and the wicket wasn't doing as much. And once they got past that 10 over mark, I was like, I feel like it would take a mistake. There was a point at which Stark got one that hit the thigh pad and rolled back through his legs and almost came onto the stumps. And I was like, that's the kind of wicket here today that you could see that would open up an end. And I think it would have been slightly harder. But once you were set, as Stark and probably Hazelwood showed, it wasn't as easy to get you out. So I think there was a few things, but yeah, I don't think it was like a point to prove. And that's just how we think about it because we go at it from narrative. They're just facing the balls and making the best of the conditions and their day. Vikram says, should India be more aggressive with the bat? No. There was probably a period where I thought, that they were on top and they didn't realize it. And that Australia, the ball had stopped seaming. So I reckon, I'd have to go back and have a look, but I reckon around the 20-25 over mark, which might have been when they started to score a couple more runs and then they pulled back again. I thought at that stage they had the chance of sort of breaking Australia. And it's really interesting listening to Travis Head saying at T, that's all right, we're going to be patient and we're going to wait here. So you essentially had two teams waiting for the other one to make a mistake. And because when you're batting, that allows you to not get massively ahead, but slowly creep up and the ball gets a little bit softer and the bowlers get a little bit more tired. You're always at an advantage if both teams are waiting and you're the batting side, right? And so if they had attacked and opened up an end, it's very possible that, I'm trying to remember who the number 3 is. My God, they've had some injuries. Devdat comes in and bats fine, right? But it's also very possible that he comes in, he's under a little bit of pressure, maybe when the ball started keeping low, or he just plays a shot and gets caught with a blinder, or gets the one good ball that he misses where the other two were a little bit more set, so they hit it. Whatever that may be, and it opens it up. So, yes, you could have said that India could have played faster, but they're in a great position. So I think we're nitpicking if we're having a go at them. But both teams definitely were playing the patient game. There's no doubt about that. I 100% agree there. Sriram said, if India had batted till the end of yesterday and scored around 250, Australia would have been on top in this game and India would have lost. How crazy the conditions dictate this game. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it might not have been as clear as that. You still have to go up against Bumrah on this pitch, so maybe not. But yeah, it's one thing Sriram, one thing I look at quite a lot is what happens within an innings. So you're trying to work out if it's the ball or the pitch. And sometimes the conditions when it's swinging as well, right? So you're trying to work out exactly what's happening. So when I see the tail start to bat good, I think, okay, is this the ball or the pitch? And during the Morning Glory show, we had a lot of people suggesting it was the ball. And I was like, I just think it's the pitch. And so once you see a sign like that, you're right. Like, you can tell that there's going to be a big change. You really, even if the ball had gone a little bit soft or wasn't doing as much, if the wicket was getting hit, a decent amount of assistance still, Stark would have just nicked off, or Hazelwood would have just nicked off earlier, right? And so conditions just sway that massively. So think about it the other way, Sriram. I think the big what if, although your one is right, I think the other big one is Alex Carey. What happens if Alex Carey doesn't go out first ball from Bumrah, right? So I don't know. Let's say he gets the edge and it flies over the top of slips instead of going through. What happens then? Is there a potentiality for the game to actually, for Australia to have a small lead and then India come out? Are they then under pressure because they were so far ahead in the game? Or do they just come out and still bat pretty well because the conditions have changed? That's the sport. And, sometimes over a 5-test series, you're going to have multitude of times when the conditions are in your favor and not in your favor, and you have to deal with it. And to be fair, in the first innings, Australia got probably the better of the batting conditions all the way through. I think that was right from that graphic we showed before. Soam says, Star put out a stat that said the average seam movement today was 0.6 compared to 0.8 on day one. Higher than I was expecting. Credits to the Indian openers. If you have to credit the Indian openers, you also have to credit Mitchell Starc. It would be very interesting to know exactly what they mean by that, because it depends on the length. So you can... If you are over pitching and getting a lot of seam, or you're bowling really, really short to try and get more seam, you're less likely to get the wicket, Soham. Our numbers, I think we just showed before on the graphic, showed a very different situation. India definitely got the better conditions of the day of the test. The best conditions of the test are bat by far. So the new ball moved around a little bit for India. So I think their first 20 overs, or certainly first 10 overs while Hazelwood was bowling, I thought they did very well. After that, I thought it was much more to do with the conditions, and that's what but you still got to get yourself in that position. And you've also, from the question before of should they have batted quicker, like they decided to sit in and wait. And that's that goes against the way that most modern players think now. And they had to do that. And by the end of the day, they were scoring more easily because of that. So I give them credit for all of that. But yeah, there was vastly less seam today than there was yesterday. And certainly a lot less from innings 1 through to innings 3 for the Indians specifically. It's completely changed. As I said, at some stages, it was half the amount of seam, right? And there's a big difference between 0.6 and 0.8 as well, and how you calculate all those things. Ditya says, if India's batters had lasted a session longer yesterday, the team would have been worse off today. Any realistic way for a captain coach to predict this stuff? Okay, so let's say, what did they make? 150. Let's say they make 250. Bumrah still goes on a run, on a tear. The game would be closer up, but what are you supposed to do? We've seen, so in the history of the game, Aditya, we've seen captains declare for conditions before, mostly with wet wickets, occasionally with seaming wickets as well. I can't think of any with spinning wickets, although there might be some. Certainly in first-class cricket, there would be some. But yeah, sometimes you can just tell. And you're like, do you want your tail enders to keep batting and soak up some pressure and hopefully put on another 20, 30, 40 runs, or are you better off bowling at that stage? Sometimes that is a thing, but there's nothing that India could have done to predict what would have happened. We all thought it might be slightly better to bat today. I don't think anyone thought there would be as big a change. And the other thing is, think about it this way. So India are massively in front in this game at the moment. And then tomorrow, if the cracks open up, India might get dismissed. Although, if those two guys can get past I suppose they've got the second new ball as well. But if India, let's say India get dismissed within 2 sessions tomorrow, it's probably because the pitch has changed again and the cracks have opened up. And at that stage, Australia will get the worst of the conditions. That's just what Test cricket is. It's not usually this extreme, to be fair, though, right? I mean, we map this sort of stuff out on this website quite a bit. It feels very extreme from day 1 to day 2 here that you don't normally see. So you can't predict that. You could predict it was going to be a better day for batting today, and I think most people did. There's a difference between it being a better day for batting. I mean, what do you think Alex Carey was thinking? He saw his one jag sideways and was like, oh, God, it's going to be the same again. And then an hour later, everyone's like, Josh Hazlewood has the best defense in Test cricket. Rahul says, this pitch seemed to be becoming low and slow. Have India missed out not playing a proper spinner? Also, what kind of target would India want to set? I mean, Washington Sundar is a proper spinner, isn't he? I mean, he's not a part-timer. Like, he's a frontline spinner. Certainly the way he's been bowling of recent times, I think it would be hard to suggest he's not. If it's cracks on this wicket, Rahul, I don't think the spinners might come into the game. Don't get me wrong, and having Ashwin over Sundar might have been a better option. But if it's cracks, the seam bowlers are probably going to do more damage anyway. It is getting lower and slower, so it is changing. But who the hell knows what it's going to be by tomorrow? But yeah, I think it's going to crack. And I think it was Gilchrist who was saying the same thing. We haven't had a lot of Test matches at the Perth Stadium, and we don't have a lot of first-class cricket there. So we don't know. No one's really an expert, right? But it feels to me that having 4 seamers and a spinner of the quality of Washington Sundar or Nathan Lyon is not a problem. As far as target goes, if they get 300 in front with Jasprit Bumrah in their side, I'd be pretty happy. But a lot of that, again, depends on the wicket. Like, if India get 300 runs in front, that probably means that the wicket is deteriorated and that 300 is a lot more. Whereas if they get 350 to 400 in front, that might mean that the wicket hasn't deteriorated. And so it's harder to bowl to. And that goes back to the previous person's question. Joseph says, is the slow field reason for such a slow run rate? Oh, I think it's played a part. It's a big ground too, Joseph. Like, it's a big playing surface. So when that ball gets hit out towards the boundary on a lot of grounds, there are easy fours that you don't get. It doesn't look like to me, I wouldn't say it's a slow outfield. I mean, maybe I'm comparing it because I commentated on some T20s in Barbados and St. Lucia recently where it was like a golf green, like the ball was just plugging. It's not quite like that, but yeah, it's not like one of those lightning fast outfields that we see quite a lot in Australia, right? Where you pierce the gap and then the fielder just chases behind 15 meters behind it all the way. So it's not that kind of field for sure. There's a couple of times where I thought I'd seen a boundary and I sort of, you know how your brain sort of goes, oh, well, that's going to go for 4, and you look away, and then you look back and go, why are they running? So yeah, that's probably slowed down a little bit, but it feels a lot more to do with the wicket than that kind of a slow run rate that we're seeing is usually a combination of a few things. So wickets on day 1 certainly played a part. The amount of seam movement, you just can't score that quickly, unless you're playing the way that Rishabh Pant did. Then you've got another collapse from Australia in their top order, so that slowed you down a little bit. Mitchell Starc wasn't taking singles, and then Jaiswal and Australia and India were playing a patient game for about a session and a half each, right? So there's a bunch of different things, but I don't think at the moment this wicket looks like a pitch where you can just comfortably play your shots in a way that traditionally a wicket like the WACA might be, right? And the WACA and Perth Stadium are obviously slightly different, but also, are they cousins? Stepbrothers? Probably not stepbrothers, are they? They're related. Rana would need a few more clicks, not up to that invincible mark, but one thing he has is a body frame. Yeah, he's got physicality is really good. I remember first time I saw Obed McCoy, there are just some guys that just look like fast bowlers. They just have that physicality, and Rana is definitely one of them. There's someone else I was looking at recently that was just, you have a look at their body type and you understand it. He's not slow. I don't know what his release point is. I haven't checked how high his release point is or anything. As I said, if he's making batters make mistakes, we can get too excited by the speed gun, right? it doesn't really matter what the speed gun says. It matters what the batter is doing. So if you look at Bumrah is a perfect example. I think Bumrah is a lot quicker than what the speed gun says, and he makes you make other errors. Malinga was another one who, even when he was slower, could do that. And I'm not saying Rana's exactly the same, but again, he seems to release the ball from a little bit forward. He's quite high action. He's quite strong. His action's probably not like, it's not that it's not really repeatable, but it's a little bit, it falls over a little bit, maybe is the best way of putting it. That's a bit of an issue. But again, when you do stuff like that, it means you bring angles in that other bowlers don't always do. I think he's an interesting prospect. I didn't think of him as a natural. I think I had Prashid Krishna and Akash Deep were the ones I thought they would use here. I've liked the way that he's gone about it so far. He bowled an incredibly long spell today, which again, good signs. Like, he can bowl long spells, but he's still in development. There's a lot of cricket ahead of him. But as you said, really good frame, fast bowling frame. Vishal says, honestly, Jared, eat shit. You and Bayram had completely written off India. Yeah, we completely wrote off New Zealand and the New Zealand men's and women's team as well, mate. And when you have pressed the Aussies against the wall, here you are with your fancy graphs. We have fancy graphs for every day of Test cricket, Vishal. Have you never been here before? What, mate, there's plenty of other YouTube channels. You don't have to do this to yourself. You just get attacked in the comments for being a bit of an idiot because everyone else points out that you don't know what you're talking about. We do fancy graphs all the time on this channel. Every scoreboard has fancy graphs. It doesn't matter if Australia's in front or behind or India's in front or behind. You just make yourself look like a bit of a tool, buddy. Have a bit of a sit down. Maybe go outside, touch some grass. Devendra says, not complaining, but Aussies are lacking that killer instinct that they are known for. And luck and conditions are favourable to India. We've been told since Pat Cummins took over, and even before, that Australia has lost that killer instinct. Since then, they've won the World Test Championship, a World Cup, T20 World Cup, and an ODI World Cup. Imagine what they would do with this killer instinct, people keep saying. They're a different kind of team than past Australian sides. I think in some ways we saw the best and the worst of that today, because we saw them not panic in that middle session when India got away. I still think there are other things that they could have tried and I would have gone with. But Pat Cummins has a way about him. He's an offensive-minded captain. He likes to restrict scoring. He was thinking India wasn't getting away. And we heard Travis Head. Travis Head was like, we're being patient. We're going to keep putting the ball in the right area. We think things will turn. My argument against that today was I just didn't see it about to turn. I thought they needed a lucky wicket, so maybe the run out would have been it. And, Usman Khawaja, we didn't talk about it in the scoreboard. I meant to put that up as well. Where Usman Khawaja had his hands really, really high for that slip catch, and it goes low. If his hands are lower, he might have been able to get under that. Might not, but he might have been able to. But his hands were in the wrong spot. But yeah, the whole killer instinct thing, it's just you're used to other kinds of Australian teams. This team's been incredibly successful. They've won 20 tests and lost 6 in their last 3 years of Test cricket, including the World Test Championship final. They won 2 World Cups that they weren't favourites for, kind of out of nowhere. They've been a very, very good side over that time. It's not killer instinct that you're talking about. What you're talking about is they would usually be quite aggressive, and it's become, you look at that top order, Khawaja, Mana, Smith, more defensive in the top order. You look at Pat Cummins. Pat Cummins puts the ball in the right area. He's not like a strike bowler in the way that Rana is, or even someone like Bumrah. He's a lot more defensive-minded. Hazelwood is a stock bowler, a great stock bowler, but I'm just going to be a line and length bowler over and over again, and that's going to be good enough. Stark, peak Stark, strike bowler. Now, I don't really know where Stark sort of fits in the Rubicons I come into. Lyon, another stock bowler. This is the team, right? The only 2 really attacking points of the team, and I suppose Carey can be sometimes with a bat, but it's probably Head and Marsh. Every other position, you look at this side, this is what they do, Devendra, and they've been very successful with it. Not today. And just on a bad point, I do think in today, and if you're on our Discord channel, if you're a Patreon member, you'll have seen I was saying they've got to shake this up. This isn't going anywhere for them. They didn't do it. to be fair, I thought India were quite similar earlier in the day as well. So both teams kind of stood in there. It eventually worked for India and it didn't work for Australia. Anurad says, dropping Ashwin is going to come back and bite us in the fourth innings. Not if the cracks open up, mate. I mean, I get it, but not if the cracks open up. If that's where you're thinking at the moment, I think maybe you've got a bit of a haunting effect from what happened against New Zealand. India is massively up. Let me just check so yesterday I said the odds were completely wrong. And I said it was evens. And I said India should have been massively ahead in that game at that point. Let's have a look what the odds are now. Australia are 7-1 and India are 120. Like if you're worried about Ashwin now, you don't need to be. Export says, Cummins' poor captaincy, what do you reckon? I actually thought both the captains were just, one-dimensional? They both played patience today. I would have gone with the bouncers. I think it has to be they're worried about the 5-test series with the bouncers. I think 3 overs of bouncers shouldn't be the end of the world, but the fact that we didn't just see that. I also think the other thing I would have tried would probably been more of line bowling with all the field up. Not all the field, someone out for the sweeper perhaps, but just to see to the guys, say you're going to come down a couple of times. We'll give you 2 boundaries. We'll give you a boundary and over for 3 overs. And if it's more than that, we'll put the field back. But they were very clear that they wanted to be patient and that they thought it would happen. Was it the Pakistan test match where they did that and it came good for them? This wicket was probably a little bit flatter than they... and Cummins didn't get the sideways movement as we were talking about before. So it probably didn't go quite the way that they should have. And I would have played it differently. Poor captaincy... There were 3 wickets in the first session. And there were really 2 for pretty much, 1 hour 55? Oh, no, was it longer than that? It was longer than 2 hours. And that was Mitchell Starc, Nathan Lyon, and Josh Hazlewood batting together. It doesn't feel like a wicket where you could force things. There were a few things I thought they could have done more of. Maybe I'd be interested in a field to Jaiswal of a short catching point, a short cover, and a short mid-off, and just bowling outside off stump to him with a deep sweeper out behind them and just going, let's see what you can do, right? That's not particular a Cummins trademark. Those are more Ben Stokes type fields, MS Dhoni type fields, aren't they? So there are things that you could come up with. I was more interested in the fact that at T, they talked about going off and coming back with new strategies. And I'm not saying they didn't change things up, but it seemed a little bit flat. But I honestly believe that they just thought that they were going to be disciplined enough and that the game wasn't being taken away from them at a speed that they could wait in, and it didn't work. I think all things considered, I mean, if you look at it, they came into this day massively behind. Perhaps what you would have seen from a different kind of captaincy is someone who would have tried to disrupt the tempo of the game. And Cummins didn't do that. But that's not who he is as a captain. And as I said before, Australia's been really successful with that kind of calm, measured approach for a while. They weren't today. Rakesh, I agree the pitch is eased up today, but I felt like the Aussie bowlers bowled a touch ball shorter than the Indian bowlers. Is there a pitch match to confirm? I didn't see that, but I felt in the first innings, Rakesh, I think India outbowled Australia in the first innings, and I thought it was because they bowled fuller. So, based on that, I would say you're probably correct. But I felt that Cummins overpitched. Hazlewood probably bowled his normal length. Maybe he needed to be half a metre fuller. It's hard to have a go at Starc because I thought he hit such a good length in the last innings, but it certainly feels to me, based on the eye test, that you're right. But I didn't look at that to have a look. But I'm trying to think who it was. There's a couple of bowlers who I thought have been a little bit too short in this match. But if you go back to yesterday, what I said about Bumrah was like he was just going to bowl like he just worked out straight away that you needed to be a little bit fuller on this wicket to be more dangerous. And I don't think the Australians managed that. Having said that, Rakesh, the only thing I would counter that with is if you're not getting any sideways movement, generally you pull back. right? Because then if you're getting sideways movement, you bowl full because the sideways movement controls the score. Once you're not getting any sideways movement, most bowlers subconsciously or consciously move back a little bit because they start to control the game. So perhaps that's what you're talking about as well. Dhruv says, is Perth the Australian Bangalore? No, because that was an outlier pitch in, the massively suited New Zealand and helped them. This pitch hasn't suited India more. They've got the conditions. Do they have the conditions more in their favour? I suppose they have got the conditions more in their favour, as someone said before, because they collapsed at the right time and got Australia in and got Australia 7 down. But they still had to get them 7 down quite quickly. So yeah, they've probably had the best of the conditions so far, in a way that New Zealand definitely did in Bengaluru. But the big difference is that Bengaluru suited the skill sets that New Zealand had, whereas I don't think this has suited India massively. Like, it still suits Australia. It just happens to be that Australia didn't handle Bumrah very well, and so they got themselves in a real hole, and they couldn't ever dig themselves out of it, even when the conditions came back into their favour, partly because of Carey, partly because of Bumrah again. So yeah, there's a touch of Bengaluru with the timing of when the pitch has helped and everything else. But if you get bowled out for 150 and you have the opposition 7 for 67 on essentially the same wicket with slightly less seam movement as we showed you before, that's not about the conditions just favouring you. That is you playing better cricket on day one. Like, India went from, I think India were 4-1 to start the day, or maybe 3-1 to start the day, but they were massive outsiders. I got bowled out for 150. They were about 8 or 9-1 probably. And then they finished that day at evens and probably should have been about 160 because of how well they played. Both teams were on that wicket yesterday. So it's not a similar situation to Bengaluru where you had a wicket that was unplayable for, about 25 overs. Then Kuldeep showed that it was starting to flatten out, and then New Zealand come back on it. I think it's a different situation, but I get your general point. Varun says, how come the pitch changes so much in a day? So what the Curator was trying to do, Varun, is usually this wicket starts a little bit more like today, and then it cracks up and no one can bat on it. And I think he's been stung, 2 or 3 times already with this. And he was like, okay, it's been raining a little bit. There's more moisture in the air. If I keep more moisture in this wicket, what I will be able to do is make sure that it doesn't crack in the same way. The problem is that Perth is so hot and the sun bakes down. I don't know. I've said this before. Dubai, Perth, Chennai. I just think the sun is closer to people in those places than it is in other places. There's other places that are hotter and that are more humid and everything else. The sun is just closer to you in those places. I've always felt it. I've got no scientific proof for this, Varun. But what happened is that surface got baked, right? So the moisture evaporates towards the overnight, and then we see the surface go from green to brown. And so it essentially has completely changed. Quite often, if you watch a test match, you see this with England quite a bit. Teams will turn up and it'll be bright green like 3 days out from the test, and everyone's terrified. But once the moisture comes out of that wicket on day one, usually they play quite flat, the English wickets, right? And, occasionally they will put grass on them on purpose, or they'll keep the grass on for another reason, or whatever that may be. But a lot of English pitches play a lot flatter. This was kind of what you saw in Perth on day one was probably more of what you would normally get on a preview day. And day one, and day two is more like you would get on day one. But in places like that, you get extreme conditions. And when you are trying to get the pitch to do something that is against its normal template, which is what they were trying to do here, right? Its normal template is really good for batting on day one, starts to wear down on day two, and then cracks and gets really hard days 3, 4, and 5. Right? That is usually what happens on the surface. When you're trying to do something different, you get extreme examples. So the best one, Varun, I would say, is the Cape Town game. Do you remember when South Africa wanted the pitch to be a bit more friendly? So they tried to get it to go against its natural characteristics, and they end up with a monster pitch, right? And that's generally what happens when you are trying to artificially change a surface to do something slightly different. So quite often you get huge variables. You don't always get the changes like this, but you usually get something that's a bit weirder. And that's what we saw today and yesterday. They tried to change the pitch to make it artificial. Eventually, the weather just went, no. We know what to do here, and that's why. So you might get it could be fascinating. It could be on day one, it's grassy and it seems. It could be on day two, it's a little bit slow and it doesn't move around all that much. And on day three, the cracks could open. So on 3 different days, you could have 3 different test pitches that you were batting on in this place. And that's not particularly normal for this. Usually you would see a normal degradation, but when you put in a variable like the weather that they had around beforehand, and like the fact they tried to keep more moisture, sometimes these things can happen. Junior says, big difference between the WACA and the Optus pitch. Look, the WACA went through a few different iterations. It was, quicker than life. Then it had that period where it was really slow and dull. When India won, like, it was a really different kind of series. There was the South Africa chase, and then they livened it back up again. They brought a new square in. I would say that the WACA is slightly more bounce, and I'm doing this off the eye, genius. I'd say the WACA pitch was slightly faster and more bounce. Better for batters. Like, one thing with the WACA is when the ball was coming through, you could play every shot you wanted. I think the Perth Stadium pitch, we don't say Optus. Let's not use Optus. We don't need to mention a phone company. It's just Perth Stadium. It will change names 5 times. If we start calling it by the sponsor's name, we end up with, like, what? If we didn't call Docklands the Docklands in Australia, how many different sponsored names would we go through? So if we go through Perth Stadium, I think it feels like it cracks quicker than the WACA. And it feels like it's a little bit slower to me. Bounce is comparable. Like, it's still bouncing the most wickets in the world, right? Especially on the early days. It doesn't feel like the WACA did. And so it's a little bit different. But yeah, Western Australian pitches in general are probably fairly similar. I'm sure there are regional areas and local pitches that are different. But, that we get a lot of hard pitches in Western Australia. And cracking is a real issue right across Western Australian pitches because of the soil composition and the temperatures. Oz says, will India Aussies have the same rivalry in the future with Indian cricket? Almost similar to Aussies today with England, same ancestry. No. So the Australia-England one is different because it's almost the sporting rivalry that exists before international sport exists, right? And then you've got the fact that there are 2 countries that are from each other. Well, the one that, the colonial tie. And also for like 70 years, it's the main contest in this sport. It's basically county cricket and Ashes are the only 2 things in this sport. It's just built into the culture in a different way. I wonder what happens to the India-Australia rivalry if Australian cricket drops off. I can't. There's so much talent in India. I just find it hard to see India dropping off. Not that they couldn't have a bad 4 years, but I can't see them having about 8 to 12 years. And maybe we won't see that with Australia. When was the last time Australia had a really bad 8 to 12 year run? 77, and that was World Series cricket through to, and they won the World Cup in the middle of that. But they haven't had many. But if Australia did have a period where they're the 4th or 5th best side in the world for 5 or 6 years, and that encompasses, about 4 India series, the way that they pack them in, what happens to that then? I find really, really interesting of where we go with that. That, for me, is a really interesting one of, does Australia have to remain one of the best teams in the world for this rivalry to work? Does the series have to remain competitive for this rivalry to work? That hasn't been the case with the Ashes. And that's the really interesting thing with the Ashes. It's more like India-Pakistan, right? Where even when the Ashes were terrible, and there are a few Australian fans who are a bit like, ugh, we're playing England again, but it was still the Ashes. And I think that's the test of this series into the future, Alice. And I can't give you an answer on that. I think it's a really interesting one. But there's a part of me that thinks also with the IPL and franchise cricket, everything changing, that if the cricket isn't of a high level and it isn't competitive at least every couple of series, I worry about that side of things. All right, we done? Oh, no, Sankop says, following on Sriram's point, why don't we see more surprise declarations? What is required to read the pitch more accurately? Need for better data, analysts, experts. No, because better data wouldn't have helped here. We don't have a lot of data on this wicket. And also, they'd never done this to this pitch before, so we weren't really sure what was going to happen to it. Why don't we see more surprise declarations? Because they go wrong. England lost a test match in Edgbaston when they did a surprise declaration early on day one. Was it day one? Day two? Whenever it was. When they declared against Australia, when Joe Root was still batting. When they go wrong, you get blamed for losing based on the back of them. Whereas no one gets blamed when they just play cricket normally, right? So there's one big reason why we see things like that. But also, you're trying to tell the future of a living surface. So right at the moment, so we all thought this pitch would be better to bat on today than it was yesterday, right? No one thought that the average would be 12 yesterday and 70 today. You probably would have thought 20 to 22 yesterday would have been a reasonable amount, and 40 to 45 today would have been a reasonable amount, right? And so that was with us knowing and guessing what was going to happen. So it's really hard to be able to do that. I mean, the grass doesn't care about your opinion, Soundkelp. India in Australia with captain on paternity leave equally invincible. Exactly, right? I mean, that's the secret sauce. Don't come over with your frontline bowlers and your captain. Leave everyone at home. Just see what happens. Have fun with it. Samit says, silly question. Odds of Bumrah to do a Hadley in 85, 86. He's probably got a better attack around him, doesn't he? And also there's 5 frontline bowlers. It's harder to go on that kind of a tear with extra bowlers. Hadley was such a unique creature, right? You know, in what he was and who he was. I really can't imagine that's going to be the case again. So I would say it's unlikely, but talent-wise, it's not unlikely. It's just more situationally, it will be unlikely. How much has Marnus worked on his bowling? Was he a leggy? Yeah, I've seen him bowl in the nets. I've seen before. If you watch the nets, the guys who bowl, and there aren't that many of them anymore, the batters who bowl quite often work on lots of things. I remember seeing Warner go from leg spin to seam, you know, talking to him about that and why that had happened and everything else. And, you know, I've seen Jofra bowl left arm finger spin and off spin in the nets. Stokes, you know, I remember first time seeing Root try all the Karen balls and leg spin. I've seen Root bowl leg spin in the nets. Guys try a lot of things in the nets. The guys who don't bowl just don't bowl. But the guys who like to bowl, like to hang around the nets, will quite often do stuff like that. Marnus is obviously one of those guys. I mean, Glenn Phillips is a perfect example of someone like this. I think those sorts of personalities just get bored, right? They just want to be involved. And it's like, Glenn Phillips is like, oh, I've done my backup wicket-keeping practice now. Can I bowl in the nets? Okay, Glenn, what are you going to bowl? Oh, I'll try some offies. And then you get good at it. They have cricket instincts. They also know where batters don't like the ball and things like that. So he'd been trying it for a while. How seriously he'd be taking it, I don't know. I haven't been on the road with the Aussies in so long. I don't remember seeing him bowl at Beckenham. Or maybe it was Beckenham I saw him bowl. I can't remember now. Truth Serum says, I saw your list of slowest run rates in Australia in the last 20 years. The list was dominated by India games. India's strategy seems to be slow to gain down with both bat and ball over the years. I actually think the list was dominated by West Indies as well. And I'm not sure that's their way of doing it. Rahul Dravid and Pujara play a big part in that, perhaps, as well. Could be the kinds of wickets they've been on. I mean, Sehwag was pretty good at the MCG at one stage. Different teams, you know, the pragmatic approach of MS Dhoni might play a part in this as well. It's in general, if you go back, Truth, to the video I did before this series, it's about how to beat Australia in Australia. Lots of charts and graphs in that for that guy who was angry about charts and graphs, by the way. Actually made a video about how India could beat Australia. But one of the ways of doing it is taking their game deep against them, because traditionally they have only 4 bowling options, and also traditionally they can lose patience, and you have to bat long against Australia, because at 1 or 2 stages, you know, or 2 or 3 stages in a series like this, they're going to bat very long. This might not be the case in this series because of, you know, all the different conditions that we've been talking about recently, but in general. So India probably know that and have the batting skill to be able to bat long, and then haven't had a lot of strike bowling options and probably have gone with a more defensive mindset off the back of that. Keshav says, This Aussie quartet attack completed 500 wickets together yesterday with an almost equal distribution among them. I didn't know about that. That's a good part. Is this the best quartet we've seen since Warne, McGrath, Lee, Gillespie? This is better than Warne, McGrath, Lee, Gillespie. It's a quartet, isn't it? Or is it? Oh, Stark's got me. It's a better quartet than Warne, McGrath, Lee, and Gillespie because they played together an awful lot more and their careers have completely overlapped. And we haven't, outside of Cummins' early part of his career, we haven't had many injury concerns. On pure talent, I suppose Warne, McGrath, Lee, and Gillespie are better. Lee never was very good at Test cricket until after those guys retired. And Lee and Gillespie probably didn't quite overlap at their best either. Well, maybe they did because I suppose it's 2000, 2004. But yeah, they've done very well. I think actually for me, the Warne McGrath thing and then the 4 bowlers now, like Australia's been very lucky to be able to have completely overlapping careers of multiple great bowlers at the same time. So, Linwell Miller, Lily Tomo, Warne McGrath, and then now, you can put you can put Cummins and Hazelwood if you just want them to be the elite guys, and then maybe and throw Lyon in, and Stark's still really good as well. So that overlapping thing, I think, has been really important, and we've seen them struggle in those brief gaps in between, right? Which is quite fascinating. But yeah, they're pretty good. They at cricket and bowling in it. Varun says, in hindsight, did India luck out by getting bowled out that early? It's funny, there's about the 4 super chat on this topic. Yes and no. Yes, I suppose they did because it meant they continued to have those good bowling conditions. But the fact that I think the conditions were not quite as good when they bowled as it was when Australia bowled, and they bowled brilliantly. So they lucked out, I suppose, from conditions point of view, but they exploited those conditions better than Australia had. Ravine says, do you think India by the virtue of the pace playing pandemic? Do you think I've got pace playing pandemic in my head. Do you think India by the virtue of playing pace and bounce well lost the art of playing spin? No, I think India have been playing spin on wickets that are ragging sideways and they've lost their confidence in playing spin. I think also my guess is there would be a natural selection these days where India is always, when they are selecting players, are no longer picking players who are just great against spin. They are now looking for players who will also be competent or better against pace, or may actually be better against pace than spin, which wouldn't always have been the case before. I think India have got much more used to it, but also think in Ranji Trophy, they made the wickets better for pace bowlers for a while, and there's a natural evolution there. But I think the biggest part here, Ravine, is that they've been playing on pitches for so long that are ragging. I think they lost their confidence quite a lot and playing spin. I don't think they're suddenly bad players of spin because it's the same guys who were dominating spin beforehand, right? So I think it's more to do with confidence and playing on tough wickets. QMS says, there was a time when Australian batters would rely on taking singles to navigate challenging conditions when scoring freely became difficult. I remember Mike Hussey used to do this. Yes. I mean, they would have done it in the first innings if they could have stayed in long enough. Yeah, I don't think that's gone away. Usman Khawaja's not really a strike rotator. Marnus is at his best, but when he gets stuck, he's not a great strike rotator. Warner was a great strike rotator. Steve Smith is one of the best strike rotators we've ever seen. So it's probably not as strong a lineup with strike rotators, but I think if you go through history, there have been times when they've had really good strike rotators and times when they haven't. But yeah, it's a skill that their best batters are not specialists at the moment. And some of that is probably also to do with limited overs cricket and T20 cricket coming in. So Travis Head and Mitch Marsh have developed in a way differently than they might have if T20 cricket wasn't the dominant form of the game. Is that us done? Wow, you guys have kept me on with a million super chats, and I thank you all so much for that. We'll be back again tomorrow with more of our charts, as we will for every day of this series will be here on the Scoreboard. There's also another show I've done with Saurabh Samani over on TalkSport, on the Following on India show. We will have a video. We probably won't have a video up of today. No, we definitely won't have a video up of today, action on the main site, because we'll put up the IPL big board stuff that we had that we've been putting together. So we'll have the IPL big board that will come out today, that will go up on the main site. Tomorrow, no matter what happens, we'll have another test video, and then after the auction and after this test match, we'll probably do another video on the auction. But yeah, it's just a bit of a shame that they've all overlapped. There's another piece I was going to be putting out as well. So we've had to delay a couple of pieces. Also, yesterday we thought, things will happen quite quickly now. And so we'll move on very quickly. And then it's completely slowed down. We played yesterday with no breaks. And today we played with the handbrake on. This is Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber, and I will see you again for more of this kind of thing tomorrow. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.